Welcome to Money Talk with Tiff, a podcast where we discuss everything money from tips and tricks to current events. Follow me on my journey to become debt-free and meet other cool people along the way. I am your host, Tiffany Grant. Now let's talk money. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Money Talk with Tiff podcast. I am super excited about today because today I have someone coming to the airwaves all the way from Italy. We are international, y'all. All right. Today I have YeSeul Kim on the line, and she is a business executive turned storyteller who loves hunting for the unexpected. When she is not recording podcasts, YeSeul is working on her book, Business Love, Your MBA to Relationships, and photojournalism project, Humans of Treviso. So, hey, YeSeul, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, it's a little early here, but that's cool.
These time differences are killing us.
Right. Anything for the show. No.
Exactly. For the love of podcasts.
Right. At least we can do it in our pajamas, right?
I mean, I got my fancy top on, but you know, it's a party up here and then a sleepover party down there.
Right. So I wanted to get into our topic today. So a lot of our money is emotional and a lot of our money is feelings. So I wanted to kind of highlight your story because it's a little different than mine, but I wanted to show people how that affects your money even to this day. I've talked about it a lot on the podcast, but I think having different perspectives and different stories being told could possibly help someone else. So, we talked a little bit before we got on, and, you said you grew up comfortable, right? So, I imagine that, you were able to get the things that you wanted and this, that, and the other. If you can just dive in a little bit to that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Korea, but then we moved to Guam, which is this beautiful tropical island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a territory of the United States. And my parents and my whole family on both sides, we are generations of business people. And so I watched my parents have a pretty successful entrepreneurial life. They owned a car rental company. They had created the first driving school in the history of Guam.
Wow.
It was kind of a monopoly at the time. So you can imagine, right? Like we just had all the business of driving schools. And then they would just like always experiment. They brought in the first cell phones into Guam back in the early 90s. And at one point, I remember they bought like a little stall to sell magnets on the streets to Japanese tourists. And they had me working there. Like that's how like entrepreneurial they were. And I just really loved watching both my parents work really hard. And because we had we owned a bunch of cars for the rental car business, I remember going to school in a different car every day. And I would like show off to my friends. So, like we had like 35 cars. Obviously it's for the business, but all owned by my parents. And so, yeah, we would go traveling, to the Philippines, and my parents were part of the Lions Club, part of like high society. And there are a lot of Kims, as you can imagine, like just Korean Americans, like half of us are Kims, but they were like the Mr. and Mrs. Kim of the island. And never worried about money, just idyllic childhood. And then one day, everything completely changed where there was a plane crash that killed actually a lot of people in Guam in like I think the late 90s. And then there was a financial crisis in all of Asia, the IMF crisis it was known. And so for an island that relied on tourism, everything just dried up completely. And it was a huge recession, and my parents were overextended and we lost everything. we were supposed to go to school, and I had gone to private school that cost like $30,000 for like kindergarten, right? Like that's when I think that's a little absurd, but couldn't afford it, and we weren't sure where I would go to school, in 2 weeks. And at that point, we left Guam to go move back with my my grandparents in Korea. And it was a culture shock. Even though I'm Korean, I didn't look Korean, I didn't speak Korean. We really didn't have much of our stuff because we left kind of in a hurry. And then I started working at the age of 12 to help support my family. I started teaching English to the kids in these apartment complex near us. My mom put up the flyers, and after school, I was teaching from like 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock every single day. And I probably at one point had around 15 students. So imagine like a fifth grader who like spoke English, but now it's a different thing when you know English and then you have to teach it, right?
Right.
And and then to Korean kids where I didn't even speak Korean very well. And I had kids from age 3 to like 18. Yeah. So it's like, how do you learn how to do this? And I think that's when I realized, wow, like a lot of responsibility for my family. I understood the value of money then. Like I knew how much money I was making, and I knew exactly where that was going, which was to basic necessities, like helping out with rent and my school fees. And so I didn't see it as traumatic at the time. But man, after years of therapy, I'm like, wow, like I would not want my children, and I know so many people go through this even at such a young age, to have that sense of responsibility. And so I think from then, money no longer became a rational thing. It's something that I never took for granted again. And unfortunately, I would say that I also became a little bit obsessed with making money. But with money, that it's a two-sided equation, right? Because if you're only focused on making money, like you kind of lose the purpose of it. Like I guess for me, it meant stability, or it meant providing. But as I grew up and I was able to earn more money and go back to feeling more comfortable, that sense of security never came along, and I just relied on money to try to solve my insecurities, and it never came. And it wasn't even like I was spending money. I hate consumerism. I try, this last year, I tried not to spend any money on clothes or anything like that. And I just realized, wow, like I got to work on this, my relationship with money, because it's extremely unhealthy, and my feelings are based on what happened to me now almost 20 years ago. So it's been a process to kind of figure out, okay, if money is a feeling, what are some also positive feelings we can add to the mix?
Right. And okay, so you hit on so many different things that I kind of want to like backtrack a little bit. So the first thing I noticed from your story was how much of a genius your parents were, because, you were saying that they had the rental car company, and then they're like, wait, we need more people with licenses or more people that know how to drive these. So let's start a driving school. And so I can see how it could become a monopoly where, you have people coming to you because they need to learn how to drive. And they're like, oh, now that you know how to drive, let's get you in a car. You know what I'm saying? So that is a genius approach. And I just wanted to point that out to the audience because, when you see a need, sometimes when you try to solve that need, it creates another need. And so just always be on the lookout for opportunities. And then also, so fast forwarding to when you were like, you had to start working when you were 12, I'm like, wow, like, I don't know what I would do if I had a classroom full of, 15 or so kids, some older than me, some way younger than me, and I'm trying to teach them all at the same time as a 12-year-old. Now, I already struggle now teaching adults.
Yeah, but adults are animals.
But could you imagine, because like even for instance with this whole coronavirus thing, all the kids had to be homeschooled, at
Yep.
least here in America. I don't know about there, but it's like I struggled, and I only have two kids, and they are 11 and 6. And let me tell you what, teachers deserve every bit of money they make and then some,
Amen.
because
Amen. And more, I'm telling
and
you.
more, because it was just ridiculous. And I don't know how people do that. So I'm just thinking, like, you as a 12-year-old having to deal with those age groups and also older and younger age groups at the same time, it just sounds like a lot. So I can see how that could be kind of traumatic.
Yeah, but I would also say that it gave me confidence at such a young age that I can start anything and I
Yes.
can figure things out as I go, which is why I've had 7 quote unquote real jobs, I'll say, and they've always been in a different industry.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I always tell them, like, I can learn anything on the job and then just give me a couple months and then I'll be, and I'll add new ideas from the previous industries that I've been a part of. So I think the adversity during the time and the traumas I've carried as baggage, but on the flip side, the self-confidence and the pride and the assurance that no matter what, I can figure things out. Those are also, I think, equally priceless and more positive things to carry around with you.
Exactly. That's a very good point, because it's building that confidence so early on. A lot of people don't have that even as adults. So a lot of people don't get that, even in not just corporate America, but all aspects of life. If you don't have the confidence, you're not going to negotiate for that salary or negotiate for that new role, or when you own your business, negotiate for your pay or things like that, or even reach out to people. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about your story, let's just get into how money is emotional and money is a feeling, because a lot of people don't get that aspect of money. And see, I feel like once you master that, then you can finally master your money. So, like, how did your upbringing translate to how you handle money today?
So I would say I was very bad at it. It was just all I focused on was on one part of the equation, which is money in, right? And counting how much money went in and how much I had in the bank, like very Gollum, like, it's like my precious, I'm not touching it. But I realized, but it was so absurd because I didn't even take track of how much I was spending. And it wasn't like I was spending a lot, but these are two important variables in the same side of the coin. And you need to be, I think, aware of how much you're spending as much as you're making. Otherwise, and I think it was because I was afraid. I was afraid I was spending too much, or I was afraid to analyze. And I'm an analytical person, but it was just really these fears. And then once I got married, my husband and I had completely different styles. Where he's very rational. He's an engineer, and he was always on top of our finances. And I was just like, well, I think you're spending too much. And he'd be like, where, like, okay, that's your feeling, but like, what is it based on evidence? I'm like, I don't know, but like, I just feel like yesterday you talked about something for like $100, and today you want to buy 5 shoes. Like, it's just too much. And it was literally just that feeling versus looking at a spreadsheet and being like, oh, okay, the $100 thing he was talking about was maybe like 5 months ago, and I'm just conflating everything, and I'm like, all I see are like receipts and him spending money. And it turns out, actually, when he did the math for me, turns out that I spent more money than him on most months than he did. And I was like, oh, maybe I don't have a right to yell at you, and maybe we really need to come up with a better system so that these fears that arise are based on truth and the reality of today, not based on my traumas of what happened in my past. And so I think we would develop, I think, a really neat system now. to kind of keep track and keep my emotions at bay.
Nice, nice. Now, before we get into that system, because I definitely want to hear all about it, I just wanted to point out that it's important to write all of this down as far as your income, your expenses, and things like that, and keep track like in a budget, because what you just showed to the audience is that sometimes you can get caught in a mental state of, it's too much. It's too much. Oh my gosh, we're spending too much. And then meanwhile, he's like, I budgeted for this and we're good. Like we're still going to be able to make our bills. Like we're good. But if you are, and it also points out that both parties need to be involved in budgeting, because if you would have seen that ahead of time, then you would have been like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing. Like this was already there and we can still pay this and we can do that and blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, it becomes one party against the other. So you were like, you're spending too much. This is ridiculous. Da, 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 da. And then, he's probably recanting back like, well, no, I, budgeted for it. You're the one spending too much. And da, 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 da. But if you don't have that hard evidence, it's like that conversation could get really heated and it can spill over. And a lot of people divorce over things like this. And so it's important to head that off. So what type of system are you all using now?
So I would say one is a tactical system and another is a mindset shift. So the tactical piece is, like I said, my mentality was always, let's save money. Spending money is bad. Like spending just always equaled bad. But then again, the other side of the equation is, okay, but saving for what? Because you can save until, you've got all these gold coins in your dungeon, but for what? And I'm all about like the intersection of my different worlds. And that's why my book is about the intersection of like business principles and frameworks you learn and applying it to relationships. And in the business world, there's something, and a good business person always asks why, right? Oh, you want to create a podcast because podcasts are cool. Like, but why does it make sense for our business to do a podcast or sponsor a podcast? What business objective are you trying to achieve if you are, trying to invest in this new software system? And that's the questions that my husband started asking me and I started asking myself of, well, why? Like, what am I saving money towards? Mm-hmm. And so we got very clear on what our savings goals were. So if it was future having a pet, right, and estimating how much it is, okay, we would create a savings account. And for example, Ally Bank has something really good where it's just one savings account, but you can put targets in there. So let's say we wanted to save $5,000 a year for a dog and $10,000 for 3 vacations. You can put the money in there, but you can kind of divert the money to these smaller pots. And so it made me feel good when we were reaching that. And I was like, oh, okay, we are meeting our savings goals. Okay, maybe it is okay that like we splurge a little bit this month on doing something a little extra. And it gave me clarity so that it wasn't just a nebulous, infinite goal of saving. So that was really, really helpful.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's just shout out Ally Bank. I wish they were a sponsor. I'm still working on it, but
you should be a sponsor, Ally.
Right. I'm going to tag them on Twitter. But this is so important. I love Ally. That's actually where I house my savings too. And I love it for that reason, but also I keep my emergency fund there. And the reason I like it, so let me just get on my Ally soapbox real quick. A, their interest rates is always more than what you'll get at like a brick and mortar bank. And then B, it takes a couple days to get your money. And so before you say, oh, I need this money, like you really have to think about that thing. Like, do I really need this money? Because it's going to take a couple days for me to get it. So I like that it's held without reach. Like I can't really reach it really quickly, because I feel like that's where a lot of people go wrong. They're like, oh, this is an emergency, and it's not really an emergency.
Yep. Yep. A broken nail is not an emergency.
Exactly. And so if I had a broken nail, for instance, I'm not going to go to Ally and pull the money out, because what? That's another 2 or 3 days. If I can live a two or 3 days with a broken nail, it's obviously not an emergency. So I just wanted to get on that soapbox. Let me hop back off. So I love you all's system, and I love that you all are hitting on the emotional side. I will say, well, first, before I get into this, how long have you all been married?
Oh gosh, I really suck at this. Okay, I think we got married in 2016. We had 3 weddings, like one in Korea, one in Italy, and one in Boston. So that's why we have like too many dates to remember. So I believe it's been 4 wonderful years together, married, and then we had dated 1.5 years before we got engaged.
Gotcha. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure we see the difference before I tell my story, because I just got married in May, and so we're like very fresh, and I can see. So I'm the money person, of course. So I'm the one wanting to budget and things like that. But I also like just saving and not spending. I hate spending unless it comes to business. I spend on business quite a bit, but I don't like spending outside of business ventures, because we both have quite a few. So he, on the other hand, like, actually, we just had this conversation a couple days ago. He was like, well, I want to have some cash just to keep in my pocket. So he just goes to the ATM, pulls out cash. And I'm like, you can't really do that when I'm budgeting, because I don't know like what you're spending it on, how you're spending it, things like that. Like if you want it to be part of your fund money, like we need to make sure we have this conversation ahead of time. And so like I have this whole system that I've had for years now, and introducing someone else to that same system when they have a different upbringing, or they're not used to paying attention to their money, it is a challenge. And so I just say kudos to you all for figuring it out. We are still in the process of figuring it out. Because like we've started doing family meetings, and in those family meetings, it's all of us. So me, him, and the kids, and we discuss like who needs help with what's going on in the household, talking about money, things like that, and bringing the kids into the conversation too. I feel
that's so great. Like to educate them early on about, again, the value of money, how to use it. That's amazing.
Yeah, because I mean, I just think about how I grew up. Like I was taught kids need to stay in a kid's place. The adults never really talked about money in front of me. If they did talk about money, it was behind closed doors, I'm sure. Because I've never heard them say anything other than my grandpa, because I grew up with my grandparents, other than my grandpa saying, hey, can I have, a few dollars, to my grandma. She was like the treasurer of the family. And so he would always go to her for, if he wanted some cash for something or money for something. So that's how I grew up. And I guess that's kind of how I am trying to treat my marriage as well. But not everybody's like that. And so we need to find our own groove, so to speak.
I went to a money seminar, though, and they said that while there might be some conflict between a saver and a spender, the real conflict is when both are spenders, right? That's when you're in a real crisis. But with relationships, I have this framework that I truly believe in that makes all relationships work. And it's a triangle. If you imagine at the base is a question of, do you love each other? Right? Cool. Like if you do, great. But it's in and of itself an insufficient criteria to stay with someone. But the second piece where I think money comes in is, do you fulfill each other's needs? So that's financial, spiritual, physical, and all of that. And if I have an emotional need that I need to know how much money we have in the bank at all times, but I suck at being the accountant for the family, and my husband is really enjoys doing that, but doesn't want to answer every day. Like, wait, how's the stock market today? What's going on? Like, that's annoying too, right? So that's his need, that he needs some space away from that. I think when couples can come together and find a solution. So like for us, our solution is he updates an Excel table, which we call our wealth tracker system. And every now and then he'll update it with our latest, IRA account information, different stocks that we hold. And then at the bottom, it tabulates automatically like how much wealth we have broken down into like liquidity and stocks and other assets that we have. And that's so great because I can access it anytime I want, and I can see whatever numbers I want. He highlights the ones in green that he thinks I should look at, and I usually do, and that calms me down. And then he can update it whenever he wants to. So I'm not bugging him, but we're still able to communicate and give each other both what we need. And so whatever that tool looks like for each couple, and whatever is a pleasure for the person, like if you love doing budgets and your husband lets you do that, that's awesome, and then he should give up the control on certain things, but whatever he likes to do, I say, support him in doing that. But also if there are things that neither of the couple likes to do, like let's say nobody likes to budget, nobody likes to think about where to put the investments, great, then I say outsource it, right? Like there's no need to force each other to do things you don't want to do. Like spend the extra money and consider it an investment in your relationship to outsource things you don't like doing with money.
And I'm glad you hit on that point because I have this theory, right? So if it's something that you don't like doing and you're not really good at, that means you need to outsource it. If it's something, so it's like a whole quadrant thing that I made up. If it's something that you are good at, but you don't like doing, then you might need to train someone else to do it as well. If it's something that you like doing, but aren't good at, that means you need to learn more. And so if it's something that you like doing and you are good at, then you need to go full force with it. So that's kind of like my whole quadrant thinking thing. So I feel like it's important to keep the open communication. I think that's where that comes in, because at the end of the day, how are you supposed to know how your significant other feels about the money situation? Is only if you have a conversation. So y'all get talking about money. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. It'll save a lot of grief down the road. Because I can tell you, like in my marriage, literally day one, actually a couple days before, we started transitioning over to our new system to where all of our money's combined and things like that. And so, I want to say it was like day 2, we had our first like money disagreement, but we were able to work through it because, we talked about it. And so just keep that line of communication completely open at all times. So anyway, we are going to kind of transition a little bit because I just wanted to hit on this. I said it in your bio, but I think it is so cool. So right now you have the Humans of Treviso photography project. So I just wanted to talk about that because my husband's a photographer. I don't really consider myself a photographer, even though last night I learned that I might have a gift, like as far as
hey.
So I just think that is so fascinating. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I moved to Treviso, which is this small town of, I think, 5,000 people within this wall. It's like 5-kilometer circumference, and it's a beautiful old walled city known as Little Venice because we have canals running through our city, and it's 20 minutes away in northeast Italy. beautiful, beautiful town, close to the sea, close to the Dolomites. You really just can't, like, it's idyllic. But it's known as a very conservative town. It's not great on the diversity front. And I'm a, Korean American, very extroverted, brash person. And even when I lived in Rome, people were like, be careful, they're very cold and it'll take you years to get to know someone. And I was like, okay, but you don't know who I am because I'm not going to wait 5 years. I'm probably going to move anyway. So I'm like, how do I make the most of it? How can I start walking down the street, like, and saying hi to people and get to know people, right? Like everybody else does here, because they've known each other since they were born and they know their grandma's brother's cousin, and they just chat on the street. And I missed that. I wanted that piece of community. And on the flip side, when I first came here, it wasn't that I was shy, but I definitely felt othered. And, as we're in this time of Black Lives Matter and creating more inclusive and equitable societies, I felt invisible. I felt like judged. I felt like and I was stared at, and people would say racial, like, epithets and whatnot and ignorant stuff on the streets. And I was like, well, you know what? Like, for every bad experience I have with these like random strangers and ignorant people, I know that there are beautiful people out here. I know they have beautiful stories. So let me tell the stories of the great people of Treviso, and let me make friends in an accelerated way. And so I was very inspired by the Humans of New York, which started all of this. I think they really created a movement of, talking to strangers, whether it's on the street or your friends of friends. And so I just started by asking a friend of a friend, hey, would you grab a coffee with me? And would you mind if I interviewed you to get to know your like life story? And so that's what's been happening, just going to people's houses. And now it's great because at the end of each interview, we ask that person to nominate the next person. So it's become this kind of change, and we're already at a friends of a friends of a friends of a friend's story now. And my circle has kind of widened. And now I really do like get stopped on the street to say hello to people I know. And it's a beautiful feeling. And the photography is, I personally don't do the photography. I found a friend of a friend who apparently had the same idea, which is amazing. And so we have a guy who's lived in Treviso all his life. His name is Davide Ronfini, and a photographer. Then you have me, the outsider, who loves just talking to people and grabbing coffees. And so the two of us just go out there, and this is just a volunteer fun project that we do, and we publish 2 to 3 stories a week on Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, having a blast, really inserting myself into this small conservative town.
Nice. I love that idea. I think you've just inspired me, because I've always wanted to kind of just interview people in the community. Really, I wanted to interview like homeless people or people that are in need and just get their story, because I feel like it's hard to hate someone when you know their story. I love that quote, because it gives you empathy. And
Yes.
so, you may go past someone and, not even see them. And I'm saying that with air quotes, on the street, and you might think, oh, they're probably on drugs, or, oh, this, that, the other, or whatever your preconceived notion is, and not really know their story. So you discount them, before you even get to know them. And so I wanted to kind of do that. So I might call it something along the lines of Humans of, and maybe my city or whatever, and go about it that way. I love that idea. So if people were interested in either following you or checking out the project or things of that nature, where can they find you?
Yeah, so our Humans of Treviso project, we're on Instagram and Facebook, and it's in Italian, but you can see the translations. It's Gente di Treviso, GentediTreviso. And if you just search that, it will show up. And then I'm personally not great at social media, but another project that if you want to check out is my podcast. It's called The Serendipity Stories. It's stories about when unexpected things happen to ordinary people, and that moment, and how that moment becomes and transforms their life forever in completely unexpected ways. We have stories about like the first Black mayor of a rural town in Oklahoma who became mayor by accident, or a girl who gets hit by a bus in South Africa and how that made her want to become a Hollywood actress. And she does it, which is amazing. Or a friend of mine who unfortunately was about to commit suicide and jump out of a window, and how she was saved at the last minute and what that meant for her life. So we have some really gripping, great stories, and that's at serendipitystories.podcast on Instagram and Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, YeSeul, for being on the show with me and joining me all the way from Italy. I'm still excited about that. But I hope you had a good time. We talked about a lot, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. And everyone, save money, but for a reason.
Exactly. Hashtag. All right. Well, you have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Money Talk with Tiff podcast. For free resources and materials, head over to moneytalkwitht.com. And while you're there, why not sign up for our newsletter so you'll never miss an episode? Talk to you soon.